Today I'm breaking down some of the cinematography in Netflix's new series, Ripley. When I'm looking at this, I tried to do the whole thing all at once. I'm now trying to break it down, looking at specific things one at a time because it just got too sprawling. So in this episode, we are going to look at the theme, if you will, of frames within frames. The whole series clearly riffs on the idea of artwork. It is something which comes up again and again in various different ways, and there are some quite fun callbacks at the end. Obviously, there may be some spoilers, so watch out. I'm trying to take all of the frames that we're looking at from the trailer so that you don't see anything that you might not have already seen. You know, a dead body somewhere, heaven forbid. So the very first frame we're going to look at just here is this kind of cool puddle shot where we're actually filming into the puddle and using that puddle and the out of focus road that's wet around it as the frame. Obviously, subject in the center just there is Ripley, and he is upside down because it's a reflection. This goes without saying, but the whole series is high contrast black and white, and because of that, all you do have to play with here is the contrast. You don't have any color to mess around with. So, for example, in a normal street scene, you might be relying on the fact there's a different color temperature of light, you know, like the orangey sodium vapor, and maybe there's a cooler blue wash of something like, I don't know, car headlights or something. Here, you only have the contrast to give you that separation. So what we're going to do is just look at a couple of things that are going on. Obviously, we've got quite a lot of highlights just around here, just the bokeh of all of the out of focus stuff, because we're focused through the puddle as a reflection, and that means that the focal plane is going to be way further away from where the puddle actually is, because we're focusing on the subject of Ripley just in the center here. Now we can make him out because fortunately there is all of this stuff happening on the brickwork just there, and he is edged quite hot along this side just here. But apart from that, our man is a silhouette. He's just in the darkness. Now, the frame within the frame here is clearly, as I mentioned, this puddle, creating that idea that we're looking through something at something else. Really straightforward. You know, anyone can go out and try this. You don't need much apart from, well, I don't know, either rain or a bottle of water to have an experiment with that. Moving on, we have a sequence which actually plays out for a relatively long time, and there are way more versions of this idea within this sequence of him on the train with the two trains kind of passing and things, where you're just looking through train windows. It's something that, you know, like street photographers will have done for years, just finding these shots. They're setting them up in a very intentional fashion, and there's a lot within this that you can kind of break down for it. So obviously we've got the frame just here, but then you've got the frame of the other train that's going along next to it that we're looking out of, and lest we forget, the camera itself is a frame. You know, we are vignetting, cutting out, matting out a portion of the world, and we're just looking at that, and we're choosing a lens to do it, and we're positioning the camera to do it. And then beyond that, there are other things like, you know, obviously the train structure is cutting out that, and then the other train is cutting him out. Now, contrast plays a big part in this as well. So there's a lot of areas that are very down just here, and most of the train interior that we can see that is in the foreground is practically silhouette. It jumps in and out because it's a moving frame, and then likewise his train jumps in and out with little blips of light kind of coming down and doing things. And obviously inside the train we have a more even level, and he is hot on both sides of his face just there, with the center of his face down a little bit. So he has shape, he has contrast, we can clearly see him. And I think the other thing that's interesting about this, and I don't know whether this is thematically on purpose or whether I'm just reading into things, but a lot of the time when we're looking at the frames, they end up being portrait, and they end up being a little bit like a passport photo. And, you know, maybe that's just because portrait shots of people tend to be like that, and passport photos, they're no different in that respect. They're just trying to show the whole of a person. People are kind of vertical, they're not horizontal unless they're lying down or dead. And it maybe is something that is just that idea of a visual motif because of the themes that are on show in the rest of the series. You'll have to watch it to find out. I read into this, but yeah, that's kind of fun. And it's something, again, you could go out, you could do this. You could totally do this without having to bring too much to the party. You can just use available light, you can use available environment and get something which is kind of similar. I like this one because it's not a perfect frame. He is very much shot from underneath, half cut off. It's really not a flattering shot at all. So in terms of the actual frame within the frame just here, you got this structure just here, but it isn't a perfect one. There's little bits where you can kind of see through, and he's moving around. There's the very bright source we've got going on just here, which is illuminating him, and we get this little catch light into his eye just there. Catch lights are a thing. I've got a whole different video on them, but they really play this hard in Ripley. They're having that glimmer of light in his eye, and it's not flattering for so many reasons. I think because of the way the light's falling on him, you've got his whole face getting relatively even illumination, but kind of from slightly underneath, creating these double chins. I mean, the actor, I forget his name, he's not in any way bad looking or have bad facial structure, what is that? But you know what I mean. This is a very unflattering shot of an otherwise good looking person who's quite photogenic. So it's interesting to see, the way it cuts off just here, and the fact that you don't have any hair there. So it makes him look almost like he's bald on top. So yeah, I just find that kind of interesting, kind of cool. And he's a bad character, so maybe these shots are intended to kind of just reinforce that fact he's not meant to be glamorous. We shouldn't be rooting for him, but we kind of do. This is another one which I think it's the kind of shot which, if you were just walking around this town, and I believe they did shoot this all in a real location, you would be able to just walk down avenues and kind of go around doorways and under bridges and see things like this. They're intentionally setting it up, but I can imagine a scenario where on the location scouts, maybe the director and the director of photography are going around with just a little camera, whatever, they probably got a Leica or maybe a little Fuji or something cool. That's in my head. And they're just going around and they're just finding perspectives that they like. I don't know that they definitely did that, but it really does feel like you could just walk around this place, find your shots. And this is one which actually they do come back to a couple of times in the show. Not loads and loads, but just enough that, I spotted it. So not a clear doorway where you just got that cutout. It's a little bit more interesting, and we have obviously the repeating pattern in the background. Just there. There's this really nice cut across with that straight line with all the other curved lines. He's mostly played in silhouette there, although not completely, because we're retaining some of the information in the clouds just there. I think they shot this on a Mini LF, so that's got pretty good dynamic range. And we're not losing all of this either. There's texture in there, there's form in there. It's kind of that sense of slightly decaying architecture, which isn't all pristine and perfect, but it does pervade the whole series. You've got this very lovely, very aesthetic town, but it isn't like it's all fresh and new and polished. So yes, that's a fun one, and one, again, just walk around, you can find it. In fact, for the whole town, I found myself thinking of The Prisoner with Patrick McGoohan. That Welsh town, I can't remember its name, Porthmeirion, Porth something. It is a real place. It's not a set. You can go there. I've been there. And because it's not a set, you are kind of free to just find these shots and look around in different directions, which is very freeing as well. You don't have to consider everything and plan everything. In that sense, you can just walk around and find the things, which is kind of fun. But then within it, they're being very precise as well. A dinner scene, and this one has lots and lots of layers in there. Very window-like look for this as well. We're talking about frames within frames, but I will talk a little bit about the lighting. But first of all, obviously we've got the frame of the doorway in the foreground just there. Kitchen, we're seeing little hints of to the side of the garlic and the cooker and whatnot. And then our focus in the center. But beyond that, we've got a doorway here. And in fact, we've got another doorway or a window in the background just there. The arch just here as well. There's lots of layers going back from all of the foreground stuff, which is a little bit more down, not completely. So this is darker on this side. We do have the idea of a push of window light coming in this direction, definitely. But they are much brighter. They're catching the full window light. Just take that out for a second, so that you can actually see clearly each of them. And there are different levels. Obviously you've got the housekeeper just here as well, nicely framed up, pretty central of the whole thing. And in the back, we do have a hotter area as well, which is always nice. When you got these windows in there, having these little hot spots that kind of just streak through onto the back wall. It gives it a little bit of life. It helps to cut out characters. Plenty of level as well across the room. We're able to see quite deep into it, and it doesn't really drop too much in level. We've just got a little bit of down just here, mostly because of shadowing and also that fall off across the room. It does feel very much like this was lit from outside with big sources just coming in, emulating window light. You could totally do this without all of the lighting. You wouldn't quite get the same precision, and you wouldn't have the same flexibility. That is the key when people are talking, when you're actually filming things that have to knit together into some kind of continuity. You do need the control so that your actors have the time, your director has the time. But if you were looking for something much shorter, you can get very, very close to that window light look just with, surprise, surprise, window light and a little bit of careful framing, maybe close a blind, open a window, maybe place a little bit of card somewhere to bounce something in, or maybe a mirror, and you can get this with minimal effort and it'll look good. The fact that it's also black and white does perhaps allow you to be a little bit more flexible with how hard you play things. You can crunch things down and it kind of feels right, in my opinion. Moving on. This has a couple of things that I want to talk about in it. You've got the obvious framing of him, and that's Ripley in the background just there within the doorway. And it's both doorways, it's the doorway out to the veranda, and it's also this one just here. We do have, drawing attention to, lots of artwork. The Picasso just here is a reasonably major plot point. I mean, it doesn't come in loads, but the Picasso is certainly a thing. It's a well-respected artist, a well-known artist, and it is very similar. It's vertical, it's sitting just there, it's a little bit abstract, so there's lots of form and shape, and certainly in black and white on a Picasso, it's just interesting to look at it in terms of form and shape and tonality, because you're not getting any of the colour, which is a travesty, but there it is. And then lots of other smaller pieces of art just dotted around. Much more down on this side, just here. Does make you wonder what the illumination is on the right-hand side. Oh, sorry, on the left-hand side for that. So maybe there's a window sort of off this way somewhere, just booking into more that side. Maybe they actually closed off a window here to make that contrast so that we have this really bright area. And then Thomas being a little bit down in the foreground, but not completely. And obviously we've got this lovely little bit of sheen coming through on the floor as well. All of this sort of stuff isn't rocket science, but the confidence to sit a camera there, have your actor play it out in quite a wide fashion, Now they're doing it and they're really thinking about what is giving the whole series as an aesthetic, because they do it again and again and again. But when you are trying to work on maybe a short film, having the confidence to lock off your camera, find a nice frame and let your talent explore it, it takes a little bit of getting used to, and you've got to have the right location, and set dressing becomes very, very important because people then have time to look around. They're not going to just be in a close-up or be in a wide for a moment that's moving where you don't have time to register everything. In this, we do have that moment to let our eyes wander around the frame. Obviously, we're drawn to the movement of Tom Ripley just there within that frame, and he is sitting against the brightest portion of the frame, so our eyes will be immediately keyed into that, and it's a human shape, and we look at those. But also, you can then let your eyes wander, and you'll notice the Picasso there, because it's a thematic thing. We've been introduced to it, so you can look around a little bit. You can see the typewriter on the table. You know, there's other stuff going on which does come up again, and it gives you that moment to think about it. Now, the pacing of this is another thing, and I won't get into it here, but it is a slower, more ponderous, and I mean that in a complimentary way, although I don't always necessarily agree with the pacing in this show. It's more ponderous, it gives you time to think and look around, and that's kind of refreshing. You don't always get that. This is part of the same sequence, and we can see we're still staying true to that window light. That is our motivation for what is happening on him. Lighter down this side. He is not very down, but he's certainly more down on that side, and we can see that plays out just there. Got this hot spot on the side of his face, and that's something that actually I wanted to just talk about a little bit, because that hot spot on the side of his face is it's a nice way of cutting out form without necessarily bringing in negative or trying to get contrast through darkness. We're getting contrast through light. So what I've got just here is a little Xeon, I forget what the designation is. It's a 25 watt, that's it, Cinemascope CM25. They did send me this for free, so this isn't a sponsored video or anything, but just so you guys are aware, in case someone sees it somewhere and goes, he's just sponsored by them, that's why he did it. So what I'm going to do, and obviously this is not that, this isn't it, but I can give myself a contrasty look. That's probably dialed in a little bit hot. Let's take that down a little bit. Oh, that's getting warmer. Okay. Look at the screen just there for a second. Yeah, okay, let's take it onto this side here. And yeah, the sheen through skin is something which is a lot of fun to play with. It can be in a talking head interview, it could be in anything, but it cuts people out, gives them a jawline, and it avoids perhaps situations where you just have a big expanse of the same tone of skin, and it can just start to look a little bit like skin. This gives you, I mean, you can see I'm looking at the screen so I can see what I'm doing, but we can see muscles moving when I'm talking. We can see a little bit of definition at the top of my cheek and my bottom of my cheek and my jaw just there. If I didn't have a beard, it would go around here as well, and there would be other things going on. It can be super subtle. If you're on a close-up, I'm relatively wide and quite close to the camera here, so it's not working in exactly the same way, but on a close-up, maybe someone's just reacting and you just have them like clenching their jaw muscle. Maybe they're tense and you can just see that. So it's a tool that you can definitely use to give you definition, help cut someone out, and also playing for plot, a way of accentuating something which is happening. In the same way an eye light helps you to look into their eyes and gives you a sense of intelligence or vitality or life even. This gives you that in a different way. It's a different thing. Now, I've got this in shot just here, but imagine this was a window kind of just there, and it was bright and it was kicking in. It's similar to what they're doing in Ripley. Obviously from here we're getting two perspectives on it because of the mirror. So yeah, it would work a little bit differently, but it's that kind of side lighting for him. Here it's a little bit more skip lighting through my skin rather than being a side light. So very cool, very easy to do as well. I mean, this, obviously I'm in a relatively dark sort of studio-y kind of environment just here, so it doesn't have to be that powerful to achieve that, but you can achieve this quite effectively with a hard light source, just booking through the skin. If it's a softer light source, which, you know, like, I don't know, a 1x1 panel or something like that, you can achieve that relatively easily, just positioning it off camera and skipping it through the skin. By making it a tiny bit softer, you still get the sheen, but you avoid some of the pitfalls of that, like, you know, ear shadows, and maybe lighting the back of the ear is a thing. Oh, I'm going to do that now. I see this quite a lot in interviews where people are trying to separate someone, and I don't know, they just end up with, I can't look in the right direction and do it. I can't get it to work. But like a lit ear, which is glowing a little bit red in shot. Yeah, it feels weird. There's ways of avoiding it. Obviously, you could tape the back of your actor's ear, but then you'll also get shadows and things casting across the face, which is sometimes nice. But by having a slightly larger source for it, you do avoid that. Yeah, so that's just a little bit of an aside on this. I always find when I'm looking at this kind of stuff, I do like to think, well, if I was going to take something out of this and try and apply it to something that I'm filming, because we don't just want to be armchair cinematographers here and look at someone's work, you know, this is a beautiful looking series. There are things that I will critique and talk about because maybe I might prefer things one way or another, but there's so much that you can learn from this, and that's one of the things I could take away. I could do it like that. So moving on, we are going to take a look at this scene. Now, at first, I think that maybe you'd look at this and say, well, that's not a frame within a frame, Dale. That's just a couple of guys talking. And you're kind of right. Ripley is sort of framed by them, but it's open at the top. You know, it's not like it's a perfect frame. He's just kind of sandwiched in between, and he's watching in the background, and we're seeing everything that's happening in the front just here. But then when we move on to the next shot, it's closer in, and now he's in focus, and we've got this signing stuff in the foreground happening out of focus. And now, because of the camera, because of the fact that we have taken the world that we know that exists and we've shot it through the camera lens and therefore cut things off, we now have a more defined frame. At the top, we are cut off. At the bottom, we're cut off just here, actually. And suddenly Ripley, he's in another frame. They've used the people, they've used the blocking, and they've managed to create this, again, just with him cut out against that relatively light brick wall in the background. He's got dark hair. He sits quite well against that. And then we still get enough detail of what's going on in the foreground just there to make things out. And their coats and jacket are dark. They're sitting down, and they're what's creating that really stark frame. Interesting, again, aside on this, for black and white, if you are going to black and white, try to monitor in black and white and try to look at your garments, your wardrobe in black and white, because things don't always render how you think. If you're looking at a coat that's a certain color, you might be thinking that it has nice contrast because of the color, but when you take it to black and white, all of a sudden, actually, it isn't doing what you expected it to do. And that can be enhanced further through the use of color filters. If you've never done any black and white film photography, using colored filters allows you to amp up or down certain colors within your scene and change the way that they sit tonally within that scene. So you can actually manipulate things. You can do it in post to a certain extent, color swapping channels and things, but sticking filtration on the front is probably the better way of doing it, in my opinion, maybe. Certainly less work in post, and you get a more definite look, and you can make those choices based on, you know, how it looks in camera. So yeah, that's an interesting way they've created that frame within a frame, kind of in a 1-2 step just there. Moving on, we're going to look at this frame just here, and I don't want to linger on this for too long because it's really similar to what we've just seen. Got the door that opens just here, Ripley's arm and face, and that creates our frame. Now at a certain point you can call anything a frame if you like, and you can just go down the rabbit hole. It's like when people start to draw the golden ratio spirals on everything and do thirds or quadrants and say, well, you have this. You can justify all of that, and to some extent all of that stuff is valid and exists and sure, but hot take, I feel that people tie themselves in knots a little bit around all that stuff. And I'm a musician, played guitar for a very, very long time. Some of the videos on this channel, in fact, are very old videos of me playing guitar. At a certain point, learning scales will become its own end goal, and it just gets very mathematical. Focusing too much on the minutiae of things like the golden ratio and the thirds thing is nice if you apply it practically and you play with it and you try to make it musical, for want of a word which applies to cinematography, and then you're actually using it, and that's great. If you only ever look at it and think about it and never learn how to make it musical, then you're just left playing scales, and that won't be satisfying for an audience, or a very niche audience, and you don't get to the musicality of it. And the musicality of it might have different versions of it that's slightly imperfect, and sometimes it's not the complete thing, and sometimes you're stealing a little bit from here and a little bit from here, so it's neither one or the other. And I think this is an example of that. You know, it is a frame within a frame. They do riff on it loads. It's definitely a theme in the series, but here I would say, yeah, it's just the musicality of it. You know, it's a casual one. It's just something that they're doing to have fun with it, and it does seem like they have had a lot of fun with this. I love this one because you've got this widescreen kind of Cinemascope vibe with it as you're walking out of, goodness, is it a station just here? And you just got this boom across the top, kind of boom across the bottom just there. It's like it's presented in mega ultra Cinemascope, like the Family Guy thing with Lawrence of Arabia. It's just like whoop, like that, and massive silhouette on Ripley in the foreground, and everything else is much more lifted. It's a very even light there. You know, the sky is just overcast and booking down, even level over everything. So we've got him in the foreground, quite dark. We've got these people dressed dark just here, and then you're just relying on that frame to really give you something. And I think that it does, because it sits different from the other locations that we've seen. It feels very different from the little town where you had all of the arches and the architecture, which was a little bit more rounded and decaying. This is very stark and clean and modern, and just gives you that slightly different vibe. So very nice, very cool. For this one, we're jumping back to a little bit of the portrait framing. And again, this feels like something you could just wander around and find this. I do wonder if the leaves were art directed in just here, because I don't know, I've on shoots, I've spent quite a lot of time on a few things trying to get the perfect level of foreground interest with stuff that isn't too distracting, but is definitely there. And yeah, there's been a lot of dancing around. So I wonder whether that was just fortuitously in the right place and they didn't think about it, or if they carefully positioned it. Or even, like with the camera, they're trying to line the camera up to be pretty planimetric with these vertical columns just here. So we've got a very flat shot. We're not tilted relative to them, so they're not leaning forwards or back. And then within the shot, we also have this wonderful kind of two-step line going across. So we got that, but then in the center we got this. It's very satisfying. If you're a street photographer and you happened upon this, you'd be very, very satisfied. It's interesting, again, that looking and overanalyzing this too much, we have that frame that he is in just there, but we also have in the background this doorway, which is darker. It's definitely putting him in a frame, but it's more the same tone as his jacket and his hair, so he gets lost a little bit in it, but we do see him going up the whole thing. So yeah, there's that moment of that little portrait framing in there. Overanalyzing the heck out of all of this, but it is fun to do, and again, that's one of those shots I think you could just wander around, find it, and have a lot of fun with it. Again, absolutely this one, 100% this one. Who hasn't been somewhere and kind of looked down a little staircase or hallway and seen just a cool view out to something? Got the handrail just there. There's enough interest in the background. There's life of people going on. The line here is going slightly off. It's not, I imagine the two buildings aren't perfectly parallel to each other. So they're splayed off a little bit. So this line isn't absolutely mathematically perfect, but still a very satisfying frame. Love it. This bathroom shot, when I saw it in the trailer, I thought she was dead in the bath, and I thought, wow, that's a massive spoiler. I can neither confirm nor deny if Marjorie is in fact dead in the bath just there. You'll have to watch it and find out. Frame within a frame, and then we got foreground out of focusness going on just here. Lots of rich, dark kind of reflections. You've got this lamp kicking out across here and creating all of this good stuff over the very ornate textured surfaces, and going over the wood just there. We're getting lots of little kicks of stuff. It makes it feel like a very rich, opulent shot. She is by far and away the brightest thing, apart from what we see just over here within the frame. Kind of vignetted a little bit, so we have that fading off to darker tones as you go up the shot just there. And it's a lovely shot, but again, talent very small within it. We're telling the story of the location they're in. We're telling the story of what it would be like to be in that place. You're looking around, you're seeing all of this. There is that sense of a massive space, a very opulent, rich space. And we're not just sitting on a close-up of her, because you totally could, they could have just been in on a close-up of her like this. And you might say, well, that tells us, we see the character more, but the characters existing in the environment is definitely a thing, and the different environments that people are in tell us something about their emotional state as well. Overanalyze everything. That's what this is all about. And finally, Ripley in this sort of elevator. It's a frame within a frame. There's stuff going on in front of him, kind of obscuring his face. So harking back to that other one where it was unflattering, we've got all of this stuff grating, just coming across, and it's giving his skin this slightly mottled texture because you've got the occlusion of the out of focus area kind of bleeding out, so it makes it darker. And then there are bits that are lighter, like just here on his forehead, you've got that hot spot, and he's very, very top lit with this. So we do have that kind of shadowed eye socket, which if you just look at what it's doing for him, it makes him feel like a villain. It's dark. It's not letting you into his eyes. However, and it's the last time I'm going to say it because this is the end of the video now, his eyes almost always have that little catchlight in them. So you can always see that little glimmer in there. And they're really committed to this. So even with everything else going on, you've still got that tiny little ping just into his eye so that you can make out where he is. And I'll talk about it more in another video, but it's cool that they've managed to keep that very consistent throughout the series. And it does mean that you get mixed messaging from this. You're kind of hiding his eyes with shadows and making it so that it feels like he's a little bit menacing, and you've got the dappling across the skin, and you're not perfectly framing him. He's a little bit shifty there, but you've got the intelligent, the glimmer, the life in his eyes. So this has been my breakdown of some, not all, some of the frames within Netflix's Ripley. Drop the comments down below. If you've got any requests for other things for me to look at, whether it is within this series or something completely different, drop them down below and I will try and get around to doing them. Any questions, also comments, we've talked about lots of different things here, so have a debate. Do people talk too much about, how things are framed and perfect framing, golden ratio and everything, or is it a perfectly valid thing to discuss at length and really chew the fat on? Have a debate. I'll see you next time.